Greetings, citizens of planet Earth. Christian Barker here, back with the latest in my ongoing series of Instagram Live interviews, which I am now choosing to call Banter with Barker. Yeah, that'll be the hashtag and that'll be the title going forward. Today I've got the great pleasure of speaking with one of my oldest and dearest friends. She's not old, young whippersnapper like myself, and not dear in the sense of expensive, but dear as in very precious. Jane Slingo, good to be speaking with you. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, Wordy. How are you?
Very nice to see you, and I'm glad to be. I don't know what did you say on Facebook earlier? Popping the cherry for the Instagram Live.
Popping the cherry. Never done it. Have seen many friends, clients do it. Never done it. First time.
Here we go. I'm glad, and I promise I'll be gentle. I'll take it slow, and we'll just ease into it. But look, as I was saying to anyone who's watching or watching back on the recording, Jane and I have been friends for a long time, 25 years or so.
20 something.
Yeah, and yeah, you know, the friendship that we had goes back to my early days working in the music business, and as a subsequently as a music / entertainment journo, and of course Jane here has continued on her career throughout her life, working in music and the nightlife economy, and you know, what can I say about you know, your background, because I guess it's extended from where you and I first met when you were working in the kind of entertainment press around kind of clubland, and then into sort of managing artists and tour management and promoting parties.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I've been doing a little bit of mentoring lately. I sit on the board of a peak body in Australia called the Association for Artist Managers, and I've been mentoring a few emerging artists, and it's really funny because we go back to, you know, the starts of your career, and it's like if you go right back, it started when I was a podium dancer at raves in the 90s. So that's kind of, and then weirdly, 25 years later, I'm still in electronic music primarily, but yeah, I have obviously done many different things in that, you know, 2.5 or so decades. So it started as, you know, a performer in clubs, and then it moved into writing for what was called street press at the time, so free print magazines, and then it led on to promoting parties, and then that led on to booking and managing artists, and I still do manage an artist today. And then that led on to curating and programming for Electronic Music Conference, and then I ended up taking that over from its original owners a few years ago, and I'm still owning and operating that today. And the nightlife piece in all of that is, well, I think it's in my bones. You know, nightlife's just been a constant in that journey of ever-changing roles within the music space. And a few years ago at Electronic Music Conference, we brought out a guest speaker from Amsterdam, a man by the name of Mirik Milan, who at the time was the nighttime mayor of Amsterdam. And we brought him out as the keynote speaker.
One day.
Yes, that's why I always say nighttime mayor. So not nightmare, but it is nightmare.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so we brought him out as a keynote speaker to EMC, that's Electronic Music Conference, back in 2016. And at the time, Sydney was 2 years into what's famously or infamously known as the lockout laws. Thus the choice, the curatorial choice to bring him out as a keynote speaker that year. And Mirik spent, you know, a full kind of 7 days on the ground in Sydney, and he really soaked up all corners of Sydney, from the government offices to, you know, raves to parties to little den clubs. And we were chatting after that week, and we kind of kicked around an idea of a one-day summit or forum that was focused on specifically on nightlife and nighttime economy. Yep. And thus we launched a forum called Global Cities After Dark, which we launched in 2017, which to this point in time has only existed in Sydney. And it's been a place where we gather the creative people at the front line of nightlife with the government people that set the policies for nightlife. And we get them all in a room together to bash it out, to workshop through and to really understand each other's worlds a little bit better, for creative people to understand the regulatory space and what goes into policy making better, and vice versa for regulators, government figures and policymakers to understand the culture and the creative side of the nighttime economy. And up until COVID, it had only existed in Sydney, but it's really interesting the conversations we're having now, because of course now there's many cities who are needing to recover and rebuild and reimagine what a 24-hour economy is going to look like.
Sure.
So yeah, I have a feeling we are going to be we're going to probably be spreading our wings outside of just Sydney in the future.
Yeah, well, look, and I don't want to be super parochial and just talk about either Sydney or the state of New South Wales, which Sydney is in, as foreign viewers may not know, or even just talk about Australia. But I imagine with what's going on at the moment, and people just getting more used to doing online conferences and online seminars and what have you, that does allow you some potential, and also eliminates the difficulties of having to, as you say, get the people in the room or fly them into the country or have them stay in hotels, which is bad lines in the hotels that you don't bring those people in. And bad for the venues, et cetera, but allows you as the organizer of these events to kind of broaden your thinking, I guess, a little. Or
I mean, I wouldn't say thing. I think there's pluses and minuses to that, because I agree. I think the digitization of everything certainly allows you to expand your reach without the cost of curating and flying in international experts. And certainly there's, during lockdown and, travel borders being closed, etc., there's no other choice. I also am a firm believer that nothing will ever replace, there is a lot you can do online, but nothing is ever going to replace that experience of being in a room with other human beings that are like-minded, and those organic little moments that pop up because you have a unexpected conversation, or you make an unexpected connection, and those little seeds get planted that flourish often into really quite remarkable things, months or years down the line. And that is something, and trust me, I've been going down a rabbit hole looking at digital platforms and options to deliver even a slither of that kind of experience. And it's just not, I think there's always still going to be that need. Perhaps, and speaking to a lot of other friends and colleagues in the conference organizer space, I think definitely there will be a very strong consideration around travel expenses. And I think possibly, I'm sure a lot of businesses are looking at their balance sheet and bottom line and looking at how they can reallocate what they used to spend on personnel flying all around the world on a very regular basis. And I think they'll probably reallocate that to, recovery needs.
Sure.
But also I think there's the environmental. I think that was already starting to happen. I know for me, I'm not someone who travels overseas every month, but certainly even the times that I did, I was already starting to, there's a regular event in Amsterdam that I attend every year, and I always go to London the week before that and then fly to Amsterdam. And a couple of years ago, I was like, hang on, I don't need to fly. And actually it's a lot more pleasurable catching the train to Amsterdam, because I can get work done, and you don't have to go to the airport, and you don't have to deal with all of that. So I think too, there's that environmental sustainability consideration for a lot of people as well. And certainly for domestic travel, I think that will it's been embedded into our psyche now, the Zoom call, the remote virtual meeting. I think there'll be definitely, do I really need to get on that plane? Do I absolutely have to be in the room with that person? Or can we be, doing what we're doing now.
Yeah, but look, I agree with you that, you know, either for those spontaneous meetings, or you know, really building a relationship with someone, you know, it's not the same as sitting in a tiny karaoke bar in Japan and throwing the back deep night,
or doing a shot with Paul Oakenfold.
We're joking because that's the photograph I put up. I think that was the only photograph I could find of the two of us together.
Mate. Great.
For some reason, on my phone every day. I think one of the first things I ever put on my own Instagram. So it's omnipresent. So I thought, but yeah, you know, we're all really close friends with Paul Oakenfold. I should just say.
Shots all the time with Okie.
That was a random encounter with Paul Oakenfold at a nightclub here in Singapore one evening.
Yeah.
But good times. But look, talking about good nights out and being on the tiles and enjoying oneself. You know, obviously our style is being a little bit crimped in that regard at the moment, and it's going to be tricky on an ongoing basis. And you know, I'd love to. I haven't really kept up to date with what's happening in Australia, but I think I've been seeing some stuff about venues are opening, but people are going to need to be 4 meters apart.
4 square meters. Yeah. So I mean, at the moment, it's complex everywhere, and everyone's at a different stage. But currently, from a Victorian perspective, there is no announcement date on venues reopening. In New South Wales, it was announced last week that certain music events can happen if they're seated. So a festival, like there's a thing called a Day on the Green, which is like you buy your lovely picnic blanket and your nice little hamper and your glass of wine, and they have, you know, a range of different kinds of artists in their programming. Things like that will be okay because it's very easy to manage a 4 square meter placement, but not. And also it's they've changed the rule. Sorry, this just happened on Friday. They've changed the rule from what was originally meant to be a capacity limitation. So venues might be able to reopen with a 50 capacity or 100 capacity. They're now from July shifting that to no capacity but 4 square meter rule. And the Prime Minister of Australia made a specific point of saying, but no nightclubs. He couldn't see that happening in the foreseeable future. But interestingly, the following day, the Premier of New South Wales stated that nightclubs potentially for August, if things go well in July, but no real read at the moment of, I mean, how do you socially distance in whether it's a nightclub or whether it's a live music space? Like obviously, you know, the measures you would put in as a gaffer, you know, some kind of marked out, here's your box that you stand in.
I've been to gigs like that where only sort of 10 people turned up in a venue that could fit 300, but
like pre-COVID gigs that had 10 people.
It was kind of a failure. But yeah, exactly. You know, it's all about that sort of throbbing mass of crowded humanity, isn't it?
And even if it's not, what happens is that, you know, okay, so even if it's not a throbbing mass, it's like the 4 square meter rule. So okay, you go out to stand in one spot and you can't move from that one spot. Yeah. And you know, the nightclub owners and operators that I have spoken to, we all agree and know it's nightclubs are, you know, you think about a club and then you think about
it's
a sweaty heat. It's about people coming together and loving music and dancing and hugging and sweating and I think what would be great, I was talking to someone about this today, I think it would be a really positive thing to at least have some insight from the various, you know, health departments around the country here anyway, in terms of at what point, what marks we would feel okay to kind of go back to not the 4 square meter thing. Like, what does that look like? Is it we need to be, you know, just throwing it out there, we need to be 60 days with no community transmission, or we need to be 120 days with no community transmission. I mean, something like that would be, I think, a great thing for those businesses to at least then, as they're reading the news every day, having some kind of idea of where do you sit in that, where are you on that timeline?
I think, and I've been having virtually all of the, it's been sort of a month and a half I've been doing these conversations on an almost daily basis with people from various areas talking about, how this situation is affecting them and their lives and their businesses. And also from everything I'm reading in the papers, everything seems to be coming back down to it's when and if hopefully we get a vaccine, because otherwise, you've just had some English people flying into New Zealand, which was completely clean, and now the Kiwis have got issues again. So, or you had the situation with the nightclub in South Korea, where that caused another little outbreak. So yeah, look, it's a really I don't know. It's Singapore. They just announced the other day, to our great celebration, that restaurants were going to be able to go back out to, but you have to sit a meter away from every. So I think a lot of these restaurants where you were kind of cheek to jowl, they're going to be operating at a fraction of their capacity, and I don't know for a lot of them whether that's going to be sustainable or profitable.
Yeah, I mean, certainly here, there's a number of venues looking at. Well, there's a number of kind of operators in the culture and hospitality space looking at all those costs that are associated with social distancing and with health and safety. And it's Australia's not a cheap country, so when you start to look at, okay, well, what does it cost for perspex shields at the bar? What does it cost for sanitization? What does it cost to ramp up the cleaning to not just regular public toilets cleaning, but also every surface? What does it look like for temperature? What are all those costs? And they stack up. They really stack up. And it's kind of that thing of, okay, well, is that economically viable to take on more cost for what is going to be reduced income, reduced revenue? Yeah.
Well, on the plus side, at least the world is going to start looking more like Blade Runner, with lots of masks and perspex things and stuff.
Yeah.
I joke about something that's, but no, we've seen all of these scenes from, I think particularly New York over the last couple of weeks, where it's been Pride Month, and we've seen photographs of where I think most of the bars there are not allowed to serve inside, but there's crowds on the street, and half the people aren't wearing their masks, and they're all kind of close together as we sort of want to be. It's not good. It's not good for the.
Well, time will tell whether that's a. I mean, I obviously wholeheartedly, support all those people that are taking to the streets right now for Black Lives Matter and Trans Lives Matter, Black Trans Lives Matter, because it's super important, and it's actually it's quite remarkable. We're watching history right now. It's quite incredible.
I was about the scenes at bars in with people just drinking, partying on the streets.
Yeah, I saw today a weird thing that a mutual friend of ours, Anthony, shared on a little Facebook group. It was from a weird EDM blog, and it was girls doing bottle surfers popping out of coffins with it was bizarre. In LA, I think it was. I was like, wow, America, all class.
Yeah. When this whole situation started, an American friend of mine who I was on the phone with, just said to me, we're not going to do this well because we just, we love our freedom, and our freedom cannot be, Americans don't like to be told what to do. So proven to be the case, which is one of the great things about America, that freedom.
Yeah. I love, it has been very frightening watching everything unfold there, though, during this pandemic, and it makes me feel better about the leadership in our country. Let's put it that way.
Sure. Well, compared to Mr. Trump, I think we're all better off. North Koreans are probably like, he's not so bad. Not so bad. Maybe not. Look, we joke. But what are you hearing from your friends in the industry globally, whether that's DJs, whether that's nightclub owners, and not everyone is a superstar DJ who makes $500,000 a night working in Las Vegas and has got probably the savings to afford. Same goes for nightclub owners and all of the other individuals who are involved in this economy. What's going on there?
So I mean, I think globally there is the general acknowledgement that the recovery is not simply going to be coronavirus is done. Even if we get a vaccine, this recovery is going to be years. And there's a very grave concern around businesses not continuing, because obviously various governments around the world have got various cultural sector relief measures in place, some more prominent and more generous than others.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of cultural resilience and creative resilience grants and funding, and obviously, wage subsidy schemes and things like JobKeeper that we've got here. And it's that what comes next, it's the cliff at the end of that. That's the concern. And it's one thing to lose a business, but then it kind of comes back to the challenges around gentrification that's been going on for a really long time anyway, with amazing creative spaces that aren't just buildings. They're the four walls that hold incredible cultural history and incredible cultural DNA that gets lost when an apartment block comes in and buys because a business is gone, and that's a huge concern, because as it is, the limited creative space around the world, the limited places for culture to actually be activated, that's a global issue amongst most cities, and that's a really big concern about that getting worse. And then if an operator of a business cannot hold on, how do you actually preserve the cultural DNA of what was created in that space? Because a lot of these businesses have been, activating culture in those walls for decades.
Yeah.
So I think there's a kind of not a sense of calm now, but a sense of, okay, there's these relief things in place. There's, a wage subsidy, but there's obviously an end point to that.
Yeah.
And then what next? And that's what we've really got to focus on now. And I actually think that, the government's obviously got a huge role to play. I was reading a very interesting report a couple of days ago, and it had a quote in this report that talked about, it's not up to governments to simply just fix everything. They've got to kind of empower the creative sector to be able to look after, to carry on and have the tools to be able to have the best chance possible of recovery. Because otherwise it's kind of like when someone's in intensive care and the patient comes out of intensive care and then you just send them on their way without any rehabilitation, But I think there's a really big role here for the private sector to play. I think there's a massive role for, brands that love to, when things are all going well, love to kind of latch on to cultural activities. And there are some brands doing it. I think the brands that will, the brands that will really shine through this year, next year, and the one after probably are those that are very clever about whatever their strategy is to be an ally for culture. Because certainly there are some brands that are like, oh, that's great, we'll give a bit of money to that pocket of cultural people there. And then it creates this unrest of like, well, hang on a minute, if you're a brand that's about culture, how do you kind of look after more in that community as opposed to... So I think I'm excited by that, and I'm excited to see which brands actually get that really right, because there are brands that have been good allies for certain parts of the art sector or certain kind of parts of culture, but then when it's come to this, they've kind of not really been that holistic in how they help support. It's kind of more supporting certain individuals or certain businesses. And I think there's a huge role for the private sector to play to kind of enhance what, I mean, let's face it, I don't know exactly what the Singaporean government is doing in terms of its cultural support right now, and forgive me for not knowing that, but you know,
No, well,
of the insights that I have into many European countries, certainly state by state around Australia, particularly the state and local governments, so the councils and the state governments, they've all been pretty remarkable in working incredibly fast to get money through to the cultural sector. Some states better than others, and some councils better than others. But generally, I think that's been really good. And I think there's a really big opening there for maybe the property developers or the, you know, as I said, those lifestyle brands that like to latch on to our culture to probably engage a bit more deeply with the sector, the cultural sector, you know, in a broader sense.
Okay. Yeah. No. Well. You mentioned Singapore. There was a national survey in one of the newspapers about most essential and least essential occupations during this period of time, and artist was number one.
I saw that meme today, and yet you had to hire an artist to get that little diagram of the artist. Yeah.
Yeah. People have pointed out. The many Swiss cheese-like holes in that argument. We don't.
It's kind of depressing, but yeah.
Sadly, there remains a lot of that attitude in this country, but you know, not just here. And you know, it's hard to argue with, you know, if you've got $5 left in your pocket, what's more essential to you, a meal or jazz hands and spirit fingers. I do. You get that from a super pragmatic point of view. I mean, you know, the other thing is going back to what you were saying about these spaces. What I'm hearing a lot of is that perhaps we will see populations now that we realise that we can work from home, and that companies realise that their staff are not less productive working from home, and that they needn't even be concentrated in
the CBD.
Yeah. In a metropolitan area, and that, you know, really, look at, if I had my, I would much prefer to live on a nice big property in the country somewhere that was, you know, where you drove your dollar further, shall we say, and a few of these things that have kept, you know, populations in cities, which is, you know, and it's all this stuff that you and I love, and it's great to, you know, as you know, I lived in Surrey Hills for many years in the inner city of Sydney, and I love being able to, you know, pop out to the pizza shop or to the pub or to, you know, go to the club or go to the cinema, or, you know, everything, great restaurants, everything was within sort of walking distance of you. But by the same token, if you could live in a, you know, beautiful big home overlooking the ocean or whatever, and for the price of a garret in the inner city, and still have, you know, access to education for your children, even though it's perhaps, or have access to, you know, many of those other things that you need, where I think, you know, this situation has kind of turbocharged a lot of the development of delivery of digital goods and services.
And I think even beyond the digital, like I mean, neighborhoods, you know, whether they're inner city neighborhoods or whether they're regional neighborhoods or whether they're, you know, suburban neighborhoods, have become very, very sophisticated in the last few years. And there's often little craft places or amazing little cafes or an incredible, you know, restaurant. And also on top of that, you had that kind of put on turbocharged by the focus on buying local. And you know, when I know that Singapore had this problem, and we definitely had it in Australia, the whole toilet paper buying craziness. There was this, you know, you would go, okay, well, let's not actually go to any of those bizarre mainstream supermarkets right now because it's all a bit hectic. And then it was like, so a lot of people would have moved to the local butcher or the local little fruit and veg place to just avoid that. So I think there's definitely a you know, I think there's a bit more of a focus on local. getting back to your point about the empty office spaces, I mean, I've been thinking about that a lot. How many businesses may actually look at leases ongoing and look at what they spend on those offices in the city and what that rental costs look like? And will we start to see businesses that actually move to more remote workforce ongoing? And if so, do empty spaces in CBD buildings present an opportunity for culture?
Absolutely. I mean, that's where you had all of those things. New York City in the 1960s and 70s, where buildings shifted from being industrial spaces to having artists move in there, and then until the 80s and 90s came along and the yuppies and gentrification and whatever happened. But I guess there was a period of a couple of decades where you had these amazing loft spaces where artists, musicians, whatever, theatrical producers, whomever they may be, could move into and do really cool stuff in great big centrally located spaces.
And maybe, I think we've got that silver linings thing. It's like I don't want to speak too soon, but I think I'm certainly not. I think there's a tough road ahead, but there's a part of me that's also very, very excited to see what culturally eventually works its way through the next 2 to 3 years. And I think there will be some really incredible new spaces, and I think there'll be some amazing art that comes out of this time, whether that's music or visual art. It's but certainly I think it's focused on the recovery first, but I think we will look back at this time, and I think there will be an incredible outcome culturally through resilience and having to make things work in a different space, in a different way, reactivating a space that wasn't cultural before, but can be cultural now.
Yeah, I often think that limiting your options makes you be more creative. Whether that's I've only got 3 ingredients to cook with, what can I make? Or this situation now, rather than having vast resources at our disposal, being a little bit more, needing to think a little bit more cleverly about it. But, you were mentioning music and the impact that this crisis is going to have on that. I know we're only sort of 4 months in, so it's really too soon to even to be able to tell. But what would be your forecast on how this is going to impact on the type of music that comes out? Is it going to be more introspective, more sinister, less dancey? I don't know. What do you think?
So I feel as though there's definitely been a big, I know there's definitely been a real obsession, is that the right word? There's been a real gravitation to nostalgia during this time. And, I don't know if you're a part of those quarantine soundtrack kind of Facebook groups where there's a bunch of people just sharing all old stuff. And I just think that's that thing in people where everything was so uncertain, everything was turned upside down in their familiar world, that it was, and no one had any clue what was going to happen tomorrow, let alone next week or next month, that it was almost like musically, I feel like people went, I need to go back to things that I know, familiar, quick. Yeah. And actually Giles Peterson, he's been amazing during this time. I watch his Worldwide FM streams and I listen to his shows every week, and he's done this amazing he's been doing things every day, but on a Thursday, he does a thing called the 20, and he chooses a genre and he goes through his outstanding record collection and he takes requests from people during the week and he does the top 20 tracks from that genre. So he's done disco and he's done trip hop and he's done reggae and it's something that I personally look forward to every Thursday night, is the 20 night. And he was talking, actually, he did a piece in The Guardian and was talking about, that it's that sense of the uncertainty has heightened people's need for familiarity. Okay. I think too that there's definitely artists that are I know because I'm in the kind of network of artists that I connect with in electronic music in Australia. There's a number of artists I know that have been very introspective, and they're probably more well known pre-COVID for, you know, banging club tunes, but then they've had this moment of solace and time to, I don't know, think a little bit deeper about them and their art and how they channel that through their art. And there was one project actually we launched a thing called United We Stream Australia last week, which is a streaming project. It's part of a global movement. United We Stream was launched across 50-something cities around the world since the lockdown in March. And we launched the Australian program last week with an artist called Motez, who's an incredible Australian Iraqi producer and composer. And he's known for like really beautiful quality, awesome house music, but very dance floor oriented. And he wrote this EP while he was in isolation called Solitude. And it's very introspective and it's just beautiful. And he did an amazing performance of it on the rugged coastline of South Australia on Raminjeri land, and then did that performance which we streamed. And there's another artist I know that's creatively developing a very deep project that's asking some pretty big questions about where we live and what was here before us and what's the meaning of this place, what's the meaning of place. And that was all things that came through in that artist's daily walks. Whilst we were in isolation, you could go out and get a little bit of fresh air and go for a walk, and that was the kind of thought process. So I think there's going to be some really beautiful music that comes out of this, which is super exciting.
Interesting. Yeah. There's constantly all of this news about, people going and learning to speak Mandarin, or doing the cliched sourdough thing, or embarking upon all of these kind of creative projects. But at the same time, I think, we forget that it is also, it's a tough time to be inspired
Yeah.
It's not inspiring being stuck inside for one. So the fact that we're about to come into a possibly or potentially devastating period of economic recession, depression is virtually inevitable, and all of the uncertainty around that. It's just uncertainty is kind
it's
of
not the most inspiring. Yeah.
It's like anti-inspiration.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a few of the artists that I've spoken to definitely, I think there was this, when lockdown first happened, there was almost like two kind of camps of creative people. There were those that were like, go, 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 and I'm exercising and cooking and doing TikTok dancing and doing this and doing that, and just on. And there was the others that just had to like go, I just need to be in my bubble, and there's some days I don't even want to get out from under the doona, and I need to just process all of this, and I don't want to feel the pressure to be creative. But a lot of the people I know that had to go through that because they were freaking out about where's my, it's a gig economy for artists and creative people. Where's my next job? How am I going to survive? How am I going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to put food on the table? And then I think part of it has been since JobKeeper here, which is like the kind of wage subsidy thing for sole traders are eligible for it. I think since that has started to come through, not for everyone, like unfortunately there is still a really big gap in that scheme, but a lot of people have successfully gotten onto it, and a lot of those people are artists. And I think there's been that little bit of, I can breathe now. And then I actually feel like that a lot of that creative time and creating is actually happening now, because it's past the like shock, and it's past the panic, and it's past the concern, and now it's there's a little bit it might be a bit of a false sense of stability because that subsidy scheme is not going to last forever. But I feel like there's a lot of people that are probably coming out of hibernation now to start creating again, and probably have internalized a lot of what has gone on, and then that will start to be processed through the creative process.
No, it's not. Australia seems to be approaching whole you know, support of creative people a little bit better than other countries. And it's imprecise though, isn't it? It's you know, really, it's very simple to say to someone, okay, you made X amount last year, and we're going to pay you 70% of that amount this year while you're, you know, staying in that job or whatever. But for someone for whom it is, yeah.
I mean, I just worry a lot about. I mean, this is probably more in the music sector, but also in the nightlife and the nighttime economy field. I really worry about losing a lot of really incredible younger people that were really motivated and driven and engaged and a part of the you know, that's the next generation. That's our next generation of people. And for a lot of those young people, it's like they've run out of, there's no job, there's limited or no opportunities, and they're kind of, many of them are running out of hope, and so starting to go, okay, well, I'm going to pivot to a different career path. And that's because it's the really smart, awesome, creative people that we need to do everything to, you know, keep them in there as well. You know, a society is, I believe a society is a better society when it's abundant in creative souls.
Absolutely. Yeah. What are you hearing from creatives or people who are involved in the nightclub, in the night economy in general? I was going to bring up that word pivot that you just mentioned, because obviously, you know, everyone's got to make a living, as the song goes, and we all earn a crust. So what are you hearing of people doing to, you know, if someone is normally performs live, shall we say, and they, you know, they earn pay by performing to a physical audience, what are they doing now are they instead somehow monetizing performing online? You know,
yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different there's a bunch of different
guys. I've been seeing a lot of the K-pop guys are actually making out like bandits. They're making a fortune, like doing
billions.
Well, they are. Yeah.
I know, it's crazy. I saw it last night. It's like 100. The figure was just like a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
But it's also, I mean, you've got to put things in context as well. It's K-pop is, you know, a very huge and very obsessed and highly engaged audience. It's quite difficult to put K-pop as the benchmark because
you can't compare, but it's like
that. I think it's incredible. Don't get me wrong, but it's like that's not going to happen for, you know, the like emerging indie artists that were starting to, like, you know, have a bit of a following. So I think in terms of the artists and the creative people, like obviously streaming, the monetization side, there's different ways that people are doing that. There's the tip model, there's the donations model, there's some going to, in the electronic space, to Mixcloud Live, which is a subscription based model. There's people pivoting and trying different things, like there was one a couple of weeks ago that was like a dinner party for 20 people in a club with a house music DJ playing, or a lineup of kind of house music there. So it was like an all-in-one price of like beautiful food, 3-course wines, etc. Yeah, it's and then there's I don't know if you saw the German rave with the chairs.
No, that sounds
yeah, it's pretty weird. It's like there was a rave, and it was a full hard house rave too. So it was all these people in like chairs going like chair dancing. There's the thing that got announced yesterday, which is the drive-in. There's the drive-in thing that's, you know, happening around the world. So
yeah. So there's ways, but not, and you know, everyone keeps. I think people in very modern roles, or roles like mine, where, you know, everything is on these devices, and, you know, my job is you know, the writing and you know, whatever else I do, writing and editing is very much, I could, as long as I've got a laptop, I could do it anywhere. But there's so many people out there who aren't lucky enough that their entire job can be done through a phone or a tablet or a laptop, and they kind of get, I think, too often forgotten in this discussion of, oh, we're all shifting to moving from home, but okay, well, what about the barman? He can't move. He can't work from home.
100%. And beyond that, there's so many gaps in the, you know, in all the advocacy work. Obviously, for obvious reasons, the focus usually goes to the artist, but it's like, of course, but then behind that you have exactly the barman and the security. And then, you know, more recently, it's like, what about the production company, the actual suppliers of big rigs, PAs and lighting? What happens if they don't exist? And especially in a big country like Australia, you need those. You can't, it's not, you know how vast the land is here. You can't just pop everything in a truck. So what happens if you go, okay, great, we can do big gigs again, but hey, guess what? In, you know, South Australia or Western Australia, there's a limited, you know, resource there now in terms of actual production. So there is certainly a lot of background conversations and background meetings and things like that happening at the moment to really identify, I guess, the contemporary music sector, to really kind of articulate its complexity, because it's a very complex ecosystem. And it's much more than just the artists, the venues, the bookers, the promoters. You know, there is, if you count all those jobs, it's hundreds of thousands of jobs, and really that focus right now has to be, how do we keep that ecosystem as intact as we possibly can through the tough road of recovery ahead.
Yeah, exactly. As you say, if it disappears once we are back to something close to normal, then everything, the other elements are gone. On a separate note, I'm interested to know, you know, in the UK, there's been a lot of talk of, you know, soccer players football players, if you're over there, who earn, you know, vast salaries, but you know, they're obviously still getting paid, and they're not, you know, and they're earning big sums during this whole period. But everyone else in that ecosystem, you know, the guy selling the hot dogs or whatever, the guy working on the merchandise stand, the cleaner, is stuffed. And there's been a lot of kind of pressure on those super high earning football players to say to them, hey guys, why don't you know,
give a little back.
Or the billionaire who owns the football team or whatever it is. Does that kind of model, you know, it just makes me wonder whether those sort of, you know, massive club owners who, I was mentioning Las Vegas before, or whether it's, you know, super clubs in Ibiza or London or you know, whatever, or those, you know, super big name DJs who have been making multi-million dollar, $50 million a year or whatever for the last however many years. Has there been any sort of dialogue around that you've seen, or
yeah, there has been, but it's been less about how do we. I didn't know if in Australia you can say you've got any mega billionaire club owners in Australia. Maybe.
Well, one in Sydney. I know of one guy who sort of is.
But there's definitely been that conversation around, less about. Oh, we need to ask whoever's the rich man or the rich person or the rich business owner for the money, and more around, we actually have to look at the whole, all the various models that are in the, you know, music business, because you would know this, having worked in the music business in the 90s. Probably a lot of the models that were in place are still in place, and a lot of them were very outdated as it was, and a lot of them were very much created to support a commercial system that benefited the few, not the many. And certainly I think what COVID-19 has done has put a spotlight on something we knew all along, which was that the music business is heavily reliant on live. Well, why is it so heavily reliant on live? So there's definitely I think there's definitely a big appetite for, and I'm certainly someone who is very focused to and committed to this, is looking at, well, rather than just kind of racing back to the new normal, let's actually kind of dissect the whole ecosystem and the whole commercial structures, all the various structures around that, and let's actually have a, you know, a deep investigation of all of those, and let's actually assess, do they need to come through to the new normal, or should we perhaps be tweaking those a little bit or leaving them behind in the pre-COVID world, however the case may be? Because and you know, like you said about the hot dog and the merchandise stand, the same with, you know, the production crews. I mean, these are people that they don't get that, it's tour to tour, gig to gig. They don't get annual leave, they don't get superannuation, and there needs to be definitely a much better support structure in place, so that it's not simply you know, the financial wins of the music business just line the pockets of the few. And I think actually the pandemic followed by Black Lives Matter, I think what these two things side by side are actually doing is putting inequality at the absolute forefront and in the music business right now. And if for this new normal, it's got to be a process of, well, what are the core values of the music business? And equality has to be the top of that. And that's equality for our, you know, Black, Indigenous people of colour. And second to that, it's equality generally, so that the many, not the few, reap the benefits of their incredible creative service. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, look, I think both industries that I've worked in my life, the music business and media, have both been, over the last, you know, 20, 25 years, completely disrupted and reshaped by digital, by the digital revolution. But as you say, you know, both of those businesses are still being run by basically the same old dudes who were running them in the 1980s and 1990s, and even didn't get it in the 1990s that things were going to change. And, you know, I think I'm seeing in media now, and I've had a few conversations about this, but it's just been organically getting worse, with everything being run on an advertising model, being you know, just proving to be harder and harder to run a profitable publishing / media business on revenue from advertising, because of sort of Google and Facebook and other digital disruptors have now take the lion's share of it. But still, everyone has kind of persevered, and that's been, you know, let's keep trying. Let's keep trying to, you know, keep things running on this old system. And with this crisis that's hit, it's really shown how broken that system is. And has, you know, I'm seeing magazines here in Singapore that, you know, have got 180 pages in them and have got 5 ads. And, you know, you're supposed to have 30% at least ad pages to run.
But do you think that, like, and the music industry is very similar, it's kind of racing back to get back to that system, but maybe I'm being an optimist, but I hope that a lot of that is simply a bit of panic to try and just keep some level of wheel turning. And I just don't think that it's going to, I don't think it's going to fly, simply going back to what it was before, when we know it was fucked, and in many ways. And
look, last year at the Singapore Grand Prix, I met one of the guys from Savage Garden, the quiet one, whatever his name was. And I said to him, oh, hey mate, you know, what do you do with yourself these days? Just sort of sit around at home and play with your kids and watch the royalty money roll in? And he said, yeah, basically. And he said, you know, we were really lucky in that we were one of the last existing bands in the world that sold, you know, 50 million, 100 million physical compact discs. And we made a lot of money out of that. Yes, we could have made more money, and the, you know, I'm sure the record company made a fortune out of it, but he just, you know, said we were extremely lucky to come along at that point in time when people were still going out and buying compact discs, and everyone went out and bought their CD. And, you know, now all those things changed, and it was okay, things seem to have been turning around with streaming and with artists making some revenue from playing live. But yeah, now once again it's the same thing. We've got the situation where they can't make the money from live.
And just also too, just a lot of the, a lot of the record label agreements are still, built for the physical world. They're not built for the streaming world.
Yeah.
And we'll have another disruption. The streaming's not the last disruption the music industry will have. There will be another one very, very soon. So,
for sure. Who knows what will come next, Jane? We shall see.
It's, at least life keeps us. At least the world keeps us on our toes.
Well, yeah. There's that mythical Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times, which I hear is not an actual Chinese curse, but it does make a lot of sense. May you live in interesting times.
We will.
We certainly. It just keeps more and more interesting, doesn't it? So
yeah, it does.
Well, it's been really cool talking with you about these interesting times in which we live, Jane.
You too, Woody. Good to see your face.
Yeah, you too. We should. Well, I think the greatest thing. And obviously, the whole COVID-19 thing and all of the lives lost is an absolute tragedy, and the, economic disaster is also, going to be equally catastrophic. But, looking at the few silver linings is that I'm talking more and more with friends who I used to just comment on their Facebook posts or
totally.
Now we're speaking a little bit more and getting a little bit more in touch with our family and friends, and maybe people who we didn't.
I've clocked more phone calls in this time, like the good old because I just kind of got that Zoom, like I can't look at another screen with a Brady Bunch thing on it, like just give me a phone call.
Oh, exactly.
I'm driving Dino, my husband, up the wall. He's just like, wow, you just talk so much every day.
Like a whole day.
He can't wait for me to go back to my office.
Yeah. I think it's great. And you do solve so much more. If it's a business call, rather than bouncing emails and text messages, or 5 minutes on the phone, you get something done. You achieve something and it's done. I think we'd forgotten about that, and we'd taken for granted, the fact that it's actually easy to call someone. You don't need to schedule a call necessarily, and you don't need to. I think you can just call, or you can. I've actually really enjoyed it, and I'm a pretty communicative person, but I've had more phone calls and more real conversation. It's been really lovely actually, because a lot of colleagues that I maybe didn't deal with all the time, but it's really. There's been so many people that I've either reconnected with or developed a stronger connection with, because you're just seeing how people are dealing with their thinking around this and what they're doing. And there's definitely been some really incredible people that I was like, oh, I knew you were cool, but you're really cool and really amazing, like got an amazing kind of mindset. So I think it's kind of flourished a whole new bunch of partnerships and kind of increased that like-minded network. So it's really, it's been a real pleasure actually. Well, the powers that be at Instagram are going to cut us off in 1 minute and 40 seconds. So, look, it's not like us to leave the party early, Jane, but so let's squeeze the last drops out of it. But yeah, wonderful speaking with you. And love to the fam.
And likewise, and back at the girls. Yeah.
Well, they're just sitting over here very quietly, doing some sort of projects. Got their heads. They're getting good.
Hey, Time, there's Tones. Hey, Tones.
We've got all the friends on here. It's great. Hello to all of our friends, and thank you to everyone else who joined us. And thank you so much, Jane. I will speak in private.
All right, Woody, I'll speak to you soon.
Take care. Ciao.
Bye. Bye.